Hello everyone, Joe from Bekusen Makgeolli here inside the brewery. Just finished brewing all day long and now it's time for a video. Now I've been putting this video in the back burner too, but it's going to, I guess, help a lot of home brewers, especially of course Makgeolli home brewers, tame a bit of that sourness. So one of the first few questions, or the biggest problem I think that a lot of people, home brewers again, get is that their makgeolli tends to be overly sour, especially if you're making a one stage or tanyangju. So in this video we're going to talk a little bit about that, and also I'm going to give you about 6 tips and tricks on how you can tame a little bit of that sourness. So here we go. Now, one of the most common makgeolli making methods, it's a tanyangju or a one-stage makgeolli. Now, if you haven't made it, we have a chapsal or sticky rice, sweet rice makgeolli making recipe that's also a one-stage. And if you're also confused about what a one-stage, two-stage, and all these stages are, you can also check some of our resources, and you'll kind of understand what we're talking about. Okay, but today we're gonna be talking about again, why is our one stage or tanyangju usually a little bit sour? Well, it's quite actually normal to have a little bit of that sourness due to a couple of reasons. Well, a tanyangju, or the flavor profile, especially if you're filtering your makgeolli, let's say 7 to 10 days, which I kind of find the sweet spot for tanyangju's. Other people might ferment it for quite longer. I also know several makgeolli brewery owners who insist that you should do it for a month. I would say that's a little bit too much for my own opinion. But in any case, when you filter it after 7 to 10 days, which is what a lot of people also recommend, is that eventually your makgeolli is going to, over the few days or weeks after you filter it, it's going to be quite carbonated. Okay, so you're going to get a sparkly makgeolli, and at the same time, it's going to be sweet and a little bit tangy. So that's naturally the nature of what a tanyangju is, right? Now, during fermentation and our nuruk, when things are kicking, one of the most important things that the nuruk has to do is to create that lactic acid bacteria, so that it prevents our nuruk from getting spoiled or getting contaminated by bad microorganisms. But at the same time, that acidity that it creates, it complements again the flavors of your makgeolli. Like I always say, makgeolli is not just sweet, especially if you're drinking more authentic or traditional makgeolli. It's going to be a subtle blend of sweetness, a little bit of acidity, savoriness, even bitterness, and many different other complex flavors that, of course, our fermentation starter nuruk brings. Okay, but that being said, again, if you're unfamiliar with a little bit of sour makgeolli, especially when making a tanyangju or a one stage, it's because most likely you haven't had the chance to savor a lot of more traditional makgeolli. Most of the commercial makgeolli or mass-produced makgeolli that doesn't use, by the way, our fermentation starter nuruk, they tend to go a little bit more on the sweeter side. That's going to be a completely different topic, but again, that little bit of acidity, again, it's something to be expected when it comes to drinking a one-stage makgeolli or a tanyangju. But again, I like a little bit of that sweet and sour kind of blend. But a lot of people, I would say, particularly, especially with makgeolli, they tend to have a sweeter tooth, or again, like I mentioned, they have that first impression that makgeolli should always be sweet. So again, if you're making a one stage or tanyangju and you want to tame a little bit of that sourness, then again, here's where we're gonna start. Okay, so number one. Okay, so one of the very simple things that I recommend people to do is to start using chapsal or sweet rice. By the way, too, also it should be Japonicus rice or short grain rice. Sometimes people make the mistake of using, for beginners, long grain, well, not long grain. Sometimes a lot of people make the mistake of using mepsal, which is your non-glutinous rice. The reason why I don't recommend using mepsal, especially if you're a beginner makgeolli brewer, is that when it comes to things like soaking and steaming, working with mepsal or non-glutinous rice, it's a little bit more tricky. So there will be much different steps in order to work with mepsal. So I do recommend, especially for beginners, to start using only chapsal. After you do, no joke, about 10 different batches at least, or 15, and you feel comfortable working with chapsal, then I can say you can graduate and start working with mepsal. Okay, and in the near future, I'm gonna try and make another video and put some of the resources on how to work with mepsal. But I would say when it comes mostly to multi-stage fermentation makgeolli recipes, then using the combination of mepsal and chapsal, that comes more into play. But that's again another topic to dive into again. So again, stick with chapsal. It's going to make your life easier in the beginning, especially for one-stage makgeollis. Yes, stay away from mepsal. Okay, so number one. Number two is there is a makgeolli making method called a sugok. Su is water and then gok is grains. So grain water. Now the only simple thing that you need to do here is so grab the amount of nuruk that you're going to use for your recipe. Again, that could be for, let's say, 2 kilograms of rice that you're brewing. That will be 200 grams if you're using 10%, of course. And steep it in water. Leave it like that for about 5 to 7 hours. When you see a little bit of the bubbles coming up and it's starting to ferment on its own, then what you do is you strain it and you're gonna have that sugok or that nuruk water. Now we discard the wheat bran and then we're just going to use the water. Now when you use the sugok method, it does help tame that sourness. It does also a great job kicking in fermentation much quicker, much safer, which is also again one of the reasons why it tames that acidity at the same time. The only I would say disadvantage when using the sugok method is, for the most part, it's going to also take away a little bit of that makgeolli complexity in some cases, and at the same time it might lower the alcohol level a couple of percentages too. Now if that's okay with you, then making a sugok is fantastic. So again, I make a lot of sugok, especially when it comes to summer times, and when I was making makgeolli at home, then during especially summer times where you have that short window to make makgeolli, especially in Korea where it's very hot and humid, then doing sugoks will be quite the answer for that. Okay, now if you want to learn a little bit more on how to specifically make sugok step by step, we have a lot of resources, but especially you can purchase our book. It's called Homebrewing Korean Rice Wine. It's an ebook that you can find it on Amazon. Links will be below in the description and you can check that out. By the way, spoiler alert, I'm working on adding different chapters to the book. If you've already purchased the book, then of course you know what sugok is you should know by this time what that is. But I'm adding more chapters to it. It's just a matter of finishing things. And I have the very intense wish again to print it out. So that's one of my biggest goals this year, 2025. Either way, the sugok method, I totally recommend it. Number 3 is temperature, of course. So a lot of people overlook the temperature aspect sometimes. I always teach my makgeolli students a very easy concept. If you've taken my class, here in Seoul, South Korea, or if you've read the book, you know what that is. I'm not gonna tell you. Maybe let's see in the comments if you've taken my class or watched or read my book. You can write that in the comments and see if you can surprise me. But in any case, especially for something like Danyangju, then you want to keep really your makgeolli fermenting around, I always say a safe zone is about 22 to 25 degrees Celsius. Anything above 28 tends to be danger zone. Anything below 20 also tends to be danger zone. Now, believe it or not, when you start making makgeolli, little things like temperature will greatly affect the final outcome of how your makgeolli is. So for the most part, I would tend to say the first 3 days when you're also stirring your makgeolli, you want to keep your makgeolli close to 25, if anything, in the mid 20s, and then after day 4, 5, 6, 7, before you filter, you want to keep your makgeolli slightly on the cooler side too. So that's one kind of know-how that a lot of brewers here recommend too. Or if you also intend to ferment for longer, then try to keep it on the cooler side, longer and slower. So if I was gonna try and make a one-stage makgeolli at Danyangju, and I was planning to filter it by day, more than 10 days, then I would just from the start try to keep it on the cooler side. And believe it or not, just by keeping data of how you keep your makgeolli, the different temperatures that you keep your makgeolli, you will have a slightly quite different variations again on the acidity too. So that's another little thing, that temperature that people overlook, but you got to be a little bit more careful about that. If you're a little bit more serious about fermenting and doing it more often and so on, it's not really bad to invest in a little fermentation chamber. So it's pretty much, you can get a little used fridge and buy something like an Inkbird and just control the temperature like that. It's as easy as that. YouTube, I'm pretty sure, has a lot of resources already, so check that out. Okay, another one that I see or I've heard some people do, again, the overall recipes that we're talking about are for one stage Danyangju's. Okay, now I've heard some people saying, or I've seen other schools teach it too, and they say, oh, filter it within 5 days. I think filtering in 5 days, honestly, there's two things that you'll compromise. First of all, the alcohol level, of course. That when you filter it very early too, it keeps it quite sweet, if anything, because again, the yeasts haven't eaten all those sugars from the starches that have been broken down. So ultimately you end up with a sweeter but lower in alcohol type of makgeolli. But I tend to feel that it lacks a complexity too in some ways when you filter a little bit early. But I would say that's another way that some people have done it in the past too. I would say I'm not a huge fan of filtering it so early. Probably the earliest I would say is, day 7 or so. Again, but if you want to try, go for it. Now, when you first learn how to make makgeolli, usually there's a concept that you learn, and that is the 1-to-1, which it means for 1 kilogram of rice, there should be 1 liter of water, same amount of rice to water. You should practice that fundamental kind of ratio when making makgeolli and do it many times. However, if you play a little bit with those ratios too, meaning if you want to add a little bit more rice, then of course your makgeolli will have a slightly heavier texture and it will be a little bit sweeter too. However, keep in mind that the more rice it has, the longer you should eventually ferment too. But again, you should keep data and start experimenting and see how adding a little bit of extra rice would make that difference in terms of flavor. Now, I wouldn't be adding twice the rice to water, so I wouldn't do it a 2-to-1. I think that's a little bit too much, if anything. But I would try in increments of 15% first and see how that goes. If you feel more confident, then again, try to push that a little bit more and more. But just keep in mind that in terms of fermentation, things might be a little bit different time-wise too. So just keep that in mind, but if you want to try that, why not? Now, number 6 is perhaps the easiest one out of the previous ones. I would say when you first again make your makgeolli, your tannyangju or a 1-stage, once you filter it and you drink that wonju, which is the wonju is that first makgeolli that you filter, then again, don't be too surprised. Once you first filter it, everything is very fiery. The flavors, the alcohol, everything's like right up in your face. Once you drink it, of course, you're gonna taste it a little bit. Then you're gonna notice all those strong flavors. But now, once you put that inside the fridge, all those strong flavors, the alcohol, even the acidity too, everything will mellow down a bit. And even with time, like I said, the carbonation will make that sourness a little bit more crisp and easier to enjoy too. But again, if you drink that wonju and you feel, well, it's a little bit more sour than I would like, what you can do very simply is you can just add your favorite sweetener. Now, do not add aspartame or stevia or any, well, those are non-fermentable sugars too. But try to add something much better. Pick your favorite honey, your favorite syrup, just add it to taste, put it back in the fridge, and forget about it for a couple of days, even a week or so. Come back to it, drink it a little bit, and it'll be more delightful or up to your taste. So that's kind of the easy way to very straightforward fix your wonju. Now, the more you start making your tanyangjus or your 1-stage, trust me, you'll get better, and you're not gonna have the need to do that. However, if you want to, I would say this is number 7 too, if anything, you can water things down. If you, of course, water things down too much, then you're gonna lose a lot of the depth and the flavor, and you're losing also alcohol, of course, right? So you don't want to add water too much, but just adding water will mellow things down too in some way. But you need to let that rest for a little bit. I would say for a couple of days up to a week, so that the flavors kind of integrate a little bit better. But at the same time, what you can also do is be more creative and add some tea on top of it, or a nice fruit juice that you want on top of your wonju, and again, let it ferment just longer and slower and cooler inside the fridge, and come back to it after a week or so, and then you'll find it again more delightful or to your taste. So, well, again, those are 6 or 7 ways now that you can kind of tame that sourness when you're making a 1-stage or a tannyangju. Now, if you guys want slides of everything I just mentioned, then you can go to the link down below, and you can download our free PDF file as well as other resources. I've been working on this Seoul Makgeolli survival guide, as well as other free content. You'll get a lot of free stuff, especially if you're coming to Seoul. Then you're gonna know where to go to find great makgeolli or soju or things like cheongju too. And of course, there's information to come and join a makgeolli making class, either for beginners or advanced, here at our brewery, Pekusen Makgeolli, or also more information on just free resources and tasting classes and so much more. All right, that was Joe from Pekusen Makgeolli. Again, if you have any questions about the topic, leave it down in the comments. I'll do my best to reply them. And if you have any other doubts or questions, let me know. Subscribe, give that a like so I know that people are watching the content. All right, peace out, happy brewing.